Hi, my name's Todd. Welcome back to the Laundry List. Welcome, Jeanette. Welcome, Jeanette, to our podcast. Jeanette's the one making it happen here. And we got Charles and Soraya on today. Blake is working, so he is not able to make it. But boy, we're having a good day. It's like 104 here. And thank God I got air conditioning in my car. I just saw a guy driving. He didn't have air conditioning, so he had the windows down. He looked really hot. But yeah, we're having a great day here at the Laundry List here in Scottsdale, Arizona at Pod Populi. There's a little plug for our guest who's coming on. We got a special guest, and he paid us quite a bit of money to come on our podcast today. He has a
Money
podcast.
well spent.
He has a podcast called The Great Love Debate. So check it out. You probably already know it. Brian Howie, welcome to the Laundry List.
Thank you. I'm very flattered to be here, and I appreciate the discount.
Yes, and the discount is a free iced tea. We're actually going to give you a red book too. We always like to give our guest a red book, which this is the Bible of relationships. And you know, if you read it, you will be more in tune on how to have healthy, happy relationships. So,
Wow. Yeah, I didn't know
check it out.
My parents had a drinking problem until I look back.
What about the second part?
The dysfunctional family?
Yeah.
Oh my God, is it dysfunctional? Yeah.
Really? What comes to mind when you think dysfunction to the family? Because
The
people
lack
use
of
that
communication.
term
Put it this way:
loosely.
my dad died about 6 weeks ago. I've yet to officially hear about it. I heard it from my cousin. I didn't hear it from my mother. I didn't hear it from my sisters. That's how distant and disinterested everybody is. Like, I heard it like a rumor. Like, hey, dad died?
Wow.
Yeah. We're not a close bunch.
I mean, that is sad.
Yeah.
But it's also that was what about when you were a kid? Because that was a long time ago.
Well, to segue into why I started the Great Love Debate. So that's part of that. So my parents had been, up until my dad passed 6 weeks ago, had been married, 56 years. I don't even think they liked each other. So because I did not trust their love for each other, I did not trust their love for me, which means I didn't entirely trust the whole concept. And that's how you get to my point in life, never been married, because you are constantly assessing, is that what marriage is like? They didn't seem to like each other. That was the house I grew up in. And B, what is this thing that everybody, and so you sort of emotionally wall yourself off not to get hurt, and then you go to therapy, and it all goes from there. So that's how the dysfunction.
Yeah. I got like 19 questions for you. But before we get started, we always like to read the laundry list. What are some of the traits that we talk about on this podcast? I want you to listen closely, Brian, and pay attention and see if there's one or two or three that you can identify with. And we're going to get into that. And I do have a lot of questions about your parents as well. So, Charles, take it away.
Didn't we set this show up just to get him right?
Yeah.
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 Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Save me $300 on my therapist.
We're gonna Fraser Crane him today.
Yeah.
All right. So these are the traits that we did demonstrate and have developed and utilized in our adult lives that came from our childhood. One, we became isolated and afraid of angry people and authority figures. Two, we became approval seekers and lost our identity in the process. Three, we are frightened by angry people and any personal criticism. Four, we either became alcoholics, marry them, or both, or find another compulsive personality, such as a workaholic, to fulfill our sick abandonment needs. Five, we live life from the viewpoint of victims and are attracted by that weakness in our love and friendship relationships. Number six, we have an overdeveloped sense of responsibility, and it is easier for us to be concerned with others rather than ourselves. And this enables us not to look too closely at our own faults. Number seven, we get guilt feelings when we stand up for ourselves instead of giving in to others. 8, we became addicted to excitement. 9, we confuse love and pity and tend to love people we can pity and ultimately rescue. 10, we have stuffed our feelings from our traumatic childhoods and have lost the ability to feel or express our feelings because it hurts so much. And this is also known as denial. Number 11, we judge ourselves harshly and have a very low sense of self-esteem. Number 12, we are dependent personalities who are terrified of abandonment and will do anything to hold on to a relationship in order not to experience those painful abandonment feelings. We often receive those from living with sick people who were never there for us emotionally. Number 13, alcoholism is a family disease, and we became para-alcoholics, also known as codependents, and took on the characteristics of that disease even though we never picked up a drink. And finally, 14, para-alcoholics, codependents, are reactors rather than actors.
Very nice,
Wow.
Charles. Thank you.
How many times have you heard that, Brian? I know you listen in on our shows.
A lot, but it didn't resonate until I was sitting in this chair. Like number 6, I'm like, oh God, am I guilty of that? People used to joke that I used to date the disease of the month because then we would focus on what was wrong with her and nobody would focus on what was wrong with me. I was like, oh, you have lupus? You want to go out? And then everybody would think, aren't I wonderful? Whatever. Alcoholic, eating disorder, whatever. I would always gravitate towards women like that. So we would always focus on getting her through the day or getting her. Nobody would ever turn the spotlight on me. I did that for years.
And what a great guy. He's such a great guy. He's dating her with all those problems.
Right. I said, wonderful. Like, I
Wonderful.
put up with whatever this is you are. And I didn't even realize people would comment on it. And I didn't realize I was doing it. You would date these quote unquote broken people, but I was the broken one, which is why I did that. Yeah.
I used to say, if they work at a donut shop or dry cleaners, they're in my category. I'm ready for them.
Yeah. You
I'm
want to
ready
feel
for 'em.
better than them in some
Yeah.
way.
One up, one down.
Uh-huh.
Yep. So let's get before we get into the laundry list and how you relate to it. Let's get into, because we were on a good segue with your parents. So your parents, you don't believe trusted each other. You didn't trust their love, and you didn't think they really liked each other. Therefore, you didn't feel like that was something that you were interested in. But I think, if you dig a little deeper, sometimes that can take you the other way. Like, well, my parents didn't really like each other, didn't really get along. But I'm going to find someone that I really love, that I really, really like, that I can really build a life and intimate, relationship with.
Yeah. And so my grandparents, my mother's parents, were a really good example, I thought, of healthy love. They made sure for 65 years they had a date every Friday night. I'm like, I want to be like them. Because they were, quote unquote, poor, and my mother grew up with it, she's like, never be like them. They're irresponsible. Fun is for like the weak, like all of that. Every time I brought them up, like, oh, I love the way grandma and grandpa, my mother would be like, no, no, no. And she negatively reinforced that as an example of what I did want, that we were a little better because we had some degree of money, I guess, growing up. And they thought that you can't complain about anything if you have. I always said that was 3 houses I was unhappy in. Like, that didn't really help me,
Right.
But my parents would not hear any of it. I went to therapy a few years ago out in Santa Barbara, and my therapist said, why don't you call your parents and invite them to sit in, like come to California and sit in on this. So I call my mother and she doesn't answer, and I leave a message like, hey, we've had some communication issues in our whole family. Maybe you'd want to come in and see if we can improve that. Doesn't call me back. Therapist a week later says, why don't you try it one more time? Leave another message. Doesn't call me back. I call my sister and I said, hey, did mom mention me trying to get like mom and dad out to therapy? And she said, yeah, it seems like you're into some weird California thing. They thought therapy was like a cult thing. That's how like emotionally whatever my family was. Like even the idea of that was somehow reflective on I was ungrateful for the childhood we had, and you're going to therapy to complain about us. You have no right to complain. And
Right.
So my therapist is
You
like,
have no idea how lucky you were.
yeah, my therapist is like, let him go.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. The three sayings we have on this podcast that we talk about is don't feel, don't trust, and don't talk. So I always use the example that like my parents would like get into this crazy fight and we weren't allowed to talk about it, my sister and I, the next day to other people or within the family. Like, Mom, why were you like raging and throwing shit and yelling? And Dad, why were you screaming? And like, we weren't allowed to talk about it. And we certainly couldn't feel. If I said that scared me and I'm crying and I'm really, really scared about that, like, shut up, I'll give you something to cry about. Mm-hmm. Or, the don't trust side, it's like, I don't trust that. When someone's angry, I don't trust you.
Right.
So like, what did you have growing up that kind of resonated with you that made you scared, feel unsafe, feel like, oh my God, my parents aren't making, because parents are supposed to make you feel safe, loved, and secure, right? I mean, especially when you're young. And if they don't, we're gonna start coping in different ways that are not typically healthy.
Yeah, I felt like I have two sisters. I felt like my father was never comfortable being a father to a son, which is a different dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
He was not close to his father at all, my grandfather on his side. And so I felt like he would take whatever anger there was as a son towards his father out on me. I was a good kid, good grades, didn't sneak out of the house, didn't do anything like that. And I was constantly grounded, beaten, all of those things that I never could understand. It was always like negative reinforcing by pretty good behavior. And I just never understood it, that he was just angry at me for no real reason. And my mother would, I was fairly close to her, but there was sort of a boundary that she would not cross, very traditional. She wasn't allowed to work and stay-at-home mom and all that kind of stuff, that it was like, sorry, your dad, is upset with you. And so I was constantly feeling bad about myself. I played a lot of sports. My father wouldn't come to my games. And I was always like, is there anything that I can do to somehow be good enough? And so then when you get through that and you get through college and that, you're constantly seeking people who will give you some sort of praise, validation, empathy, any kind of thing. I needed to surround so you're constantly seeking approval, because I don't think I got it at, therapist always makes you talk to 5-year-old Brian,
Yeah. So at 5 years old, you're obviously not talking like you are today. So you're seeing it logically, and you're seeing it as a smart adult. But when you're 5, what are the messages coming to you? Because you're not thinking at 5, oh, my dad just, he's better with women and he just doesn't really know how to be a father to a son. Like, you're not thinking those thoughts.
No.
So what are you thinking about it at 5 on shit?
That there must be something wrong with me for this person to not like me.
Right. Something's wrong with me. I must be doing something because my dad doesn't pay attention to me. He's not giving me validation. He doesn't love me. He really loves my sisters, and they seem to be doing something right because he gives them all the attention. And that's got to be really hard, right? I mean,
and my sister's like, because I spoke to my sister about this maybe 10 years ago, my younger sister, and she's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I had a great childhood. I'm like, you did? It was different. And she's like, yeah, I didn't really notice what was going on with you, but I noticed it.
And how'd your mom deal with it and treat you?
Well, but there was always a limit to it. There was always like it was very whatever your father says, whatever your father did, whatever.
He was the golden rule,
right? Because to her, she grew up with no money. She grew up poor. He got her out of that. She felt very.
So she was rescued.
Yeah. So there was only so much. She would always be like, well, you have this, you have that, blah, blah, blah.
What are you
can't
complaining
complain about any emotional. Yeah, it was, you were not allowed to complain about anything or even question. Complain probably isn't even the right word. You weren't allowed to question, why is this? Why doesn't dad come to my games? And you get some answer like, well, because he works hard to give all you things you have. I'm like, all the other dads are there, and they're like, they're losers. Like, there was something wrong with the fathers who were at my Little League games. It was very...
Yeah. And again, as an adult now, you can see that and speak clearly to that. But as a 5 or 6 or 7-year-old, you continue to tell yourself messages that, okay, Dad, I'm broken. I'm not good enough. Dad doesn't, think I'm important enough to come to my games.
Yeah.
And those get replayed over and over again, right? We have thousands of thoughts every day in our brain, and it's like, play that over thousands of times each day over years. You're creating a pretty substantial pattern that I'm not good enough, I'm broken, I don't deserve love, and why would a woman ever want me or like me?
I mean, I just remember the phrase, like the first time I heard it. I think I was like 7. I don't remember anything before I was 7 years old. Nothing. I don't remember kindergarten. I don't remember anything. So who knows what happened then? But I remember him. I was 7 years old, and he just comes into my room and he goes, "You're a rotten kid," and that phrase stuck with me forever. And it wasn't it was the first time he said it, but he said it a lot. Like that specific weird phrase described me as rotten. And
you were 7 when you first remembered that.
Yeah, I remember the moment I first heard it.
And that was one of the first things you remembered.
That's literally the first thing I remember.
Isn't that amazing? And then you block out everything prior to
that. I don't remember a thing.
I always find that when
I
you
don't
block
remember a
things
house.
out, my experience is that it was pretty traumatic. Like when there's great memories, it's typically like there were really good times. But when you block shit out, it's usually because there was some hardship, and it's a survival mechanism to block it out.
Yeah. I don't, because I've thought about like, what am I blocking? So I even went and took a trip, and I drove to the house that we lived in when I was 4 or 5, 3. I'm like, I don't know. It wasn't like House of Horrors or anything. Like, I don't remember it at all. And it was very strange. I'm like, this is like, I lived here. This is my room. Like, I don't, nothing. And so it all starts, that's my earliest memory. That is the memory of the conversations with my father. Is just that, like, I don't really have any people. So when my dad died, a few people were like, oh, think about the good times or think about conversations. And there are none. There are no conversations that I remember with him. I would play, golf sometimes with him. There would be no, how's it going, son? There was no, like, literally, it would be like, you're away, you're up, you're shot, putt. That was it.
Business.
Like, people said, like, oh, try and think back to some good time. I'm like, there are none. And it's not like my parents got divorced and my father moved away. Like, no, we were in the same house for a long time, and there is no memory other than that phrase.
So what did you do then when you were a kid to escape that type of experience and to bring yourself some joy? And
I would tap in. So my dad was an IBM guy, very, the old school IBM.
so did you grow up in New York? Or?
Yeah, grew up in New York. So he was corporate Armonk. We lived in Paris for a couple of years, so he was up in that. I always thought, this doesn't seem like a happy person. I don't want to do that. I was also very smart. Like, I tested at a very high IQ at a young age, which is the worst thing you can have with demanding parents. I was better off not being that. So I always had a creative side to me. Like, I wanted to, so I'd go in my room and I would like write short stories and stuff. And my parents were furious about that. They think that was a waste of my talent and a waste of my brain to this day. Because I do Great Love Debate. I do a lot of comedy clubs all over the world. If somebody comes up to me and says, oh my God, you were so funny, part of me thinks I'm going to get hit because funny was associated as a bad thing in my house. Like, that's like the worst compliment.
That's not a compliment.
It's the worst compliment I get when, like, most of my career now is being funny.
Yeah.
And I don't respond well to that. And it's terrible that it's not like I try and hide being funny. It's that I'm always worried that like they'll find out. Like a wasted. So there's a direct line to them. So I went into the entertainment business. I was a writer, director, producer for a long, long time in showbiz. I guess I still am. And my father one time called me up and he said, are you still doing that Hollywood thing? And I go, yeah. And he goes, what's going to happen when you run out of ideas? And I go, well, I don't think there's limits on imagination. I don't think I'll ever run out of ideas. And they associate me going into that business like I'm just floating on a raft at the Playboy Mansion and not a serious person, which is why I didn't get married, which is why I didn't give them grandchildren or whatever. They draw a straight line to that. Like, because you gave away the gift of intelligence, and I did well. Like, they did not care. They're like, you intentionally like wasted your upbringing, education, all the advantages to go to a frivolous industry, and all that. So, you're constantly. The more successful you got, the more they would get mad. It
was your mom like this? It was the same. Was your mom the same way?
Yeah, for a while, because they were like, this must be why he's not married, because he's in television.
No, but when you were younger, did your mom like give you validation, approval, love, like come to your games,
yes,
tell you how great you were?
Yes.
Okay, so
not
your mom,
in front of my father.
But so your mom was the one who made you feel good about yourself.
Yes.
But didn't do it in front of your father because
right.
she didn't want to get in trouble.
There's a lot of don't tell your father we did
right.
this. Don't tell your father I did it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so when she was around your father, she's a different person. But when she's by herself, she's a different person.
Yeah, and I think she drank more than I knew. Like when I was a kid, she backed out of the garage with it closed, and she blamed it on a faulty mirror. But looking back, I was like, oh yeah, that was the happy hour at the Howie house, and it was like stuff like that. Like my mother would down a bottle of wine, and my father would come home and drink 3 bourbons, and it was a very drinky culture after 4 o'clock in my house. And
did you notice the behavior in the house changed?
I
or
didn't
the
at
vibe?
the time. I looked back on it. Like, when did most of this stuff happen? When did most of the anger come out? When did most of the groundings, beatings, whatever happen? And it was always in that, 5 p.m. to 8 p.m.
The dark time, the nighttime.
Yeah, the early evening, nighttime, or whatever is when that happened. Yeah, and at the time you don't realize, and then you get into the same sort of relationship patterns where you're looking for some sort of approval or validation, or you date certain types of women, and I would always, not that I would date necessarily all the broken women, but I always gravitate towards ones who were like, I don't really care that much about getting married and having kids. So then I'm like, oh, there's an emotional ceiling on this one. That seems like the one for me. I would get into situations where I would never have to put all my chips in the middle of the table. You just put enough chips to stay in the game, but I wouldn't have to go all in. I would consciously look for that.
I just never wanted people to know how dumb I was, and how low my IQ was, and how unsuccessful I was, and how I wasn't smart enough, and blah blah blah. And it's like, so I always pick someone that I would be the hero to, right? The rescuer, the damsel in distress. And I think after learning a lot and years of experience, no one has a fucking clue on what they're doing, and no one has a clue on what they're doing. Everyone thinks they're putting on a good facade and a good act, but I've been in rooms with plenty of billionaires, and it's like they're faking it just as much as I am.
There's a whole lot of imposter syndrome. I the greatest meeting I ever had, at least in the entertainment business, was when I was in a meeting, a bunch of hotshot managers and agents, and I'm like, these guys are either A, so full of shit, or B, there may be one chapter in the book ahead of wherever I am in this journey. That was such a good thing, because then I was like, oh, okay, I'm not intimidated by this anymore. And it was a good experience to go through. But then, I start doing this live show called The Great Love Debate, which it turned into a podcast later, but it started as a live touring, traveling show that was supposed to be a one-off promotional appearance. I wrote a book called How to Find Love in 60 Seconds, which was a satirical look at dating. And my manager at the time said, rather than do a book tour with 20 people in a Barnes & Noble, why don't you raise some of the questions that this book raises in a theater, town hall style setting? And so I was supposed to do one of those. I've now, 10 years later, done 500 of them all over the world. But about a year into it, somebody said to me, somebody was, raised their hand in the crowd, and I'm like, these people are experiencing and feeling shit that I don't even know about. I was more like Jerry Springer to them, at the crowd, dating's easy, let's fuck with the men and the women. That's what I would do. And then I'm like, especially the men, they were going to a level of vulnerability and stuff that I'm like, I don't even know what they're talking about. So I found a therapist, and right about the time that therapy started to get anywhere with me, my eyesight got a little worse, so it was I needed reading glasses. To this day, I still only need reading glasses. I wear my glasses all the time. Do you know why?
Security blanket.
Yeah, it's an extra. I feel like I'm too exposed, that I need a level of glass to protect. So nobody. I almost never take.
You know what
them
the
off.
biggest? You know what the biggest security blanket in the world is today,
What?
right?
What?
Your phone.
Yeah.
How many people are looking at their phone? They got nothing fucking to do.
It says don't talk to me.
Because they don't want to be
but
intimate.
Now, I
they don't
really
want to talk
only
about how
need
they're
my
feeling.
glasses to look at my
Right.
phone, but I have
Yes.
glasses on all the time because I feel too vulnerable.
I look at all these people, and they're looking at their phone. They're like, you got nothing to fucking do. You're not that important. You don't have a job.
It says don't talk to me.
It says don't talk to me. Don't get intimate. Don't ask me really my emotions, how I'm feeling.
So the glasses came on when the soul opened up, and they haven't really come off since.
Yeah. Interesting. So, I always people are like, not everybody wants to be in a healthy, intimate relationship. And I think that's great, because not everyone has the same desires in life. Some people want kids. Some people don't. Some people want to be in a romantic, beautiful, healthy, intimate relationship. Some people don't. I think it's important to find out what you want in life, what each individual wants in life. Do they want to have kids? What kind of career do they want? Where do they want to live? What do they want to do with their life? We only have so many hours on this earth.
Well, I think I had to get to a point where I felt I was capable of that. And I wanted to do, 50 years with somebody. That took me a while. And then I got to, because you get asked the question, especially me, I get asked the question all the time because I'm the host of the Great Love Debate. How come you're still single? And
but that's okay if that's what you want.
My flippant answer is, well, it's only 3:00, But then when they ask for a serious answer, I'm like, I didn't feel I was emotionally able to handle the responsibility that comes with being in this long-term monogamous relationship with one other person. Wow. I feel I can now. But looking back, it was just
you may not have 50 years, but,
Right, I know. It shortened the window a little bit, make it easier to do 30.
Yeah.
So,
the older you get, the
I'm shocked at how appealing that is to women, that you're taught so long as a man not to show weakness or be vulnerable. They love to know you're doing the work.
No question.
Because they know you're fucked up, and they're like, okay, as long as you know, it's a lot easier for me. Yeah, I was surprised at that too. Yeah.
The guy who has it all figured out, the guy who's stoic, like, ladies, run, don't walk.
Right. They don't trust it.
Yeah. Run. It's interesting because, like, I always find it's very easy for people to give advice, but how can you give advice to someone that you've known for a short period of time in a quick conversation? Like someone's like been in a marriage for 20 years and the guy's like, I don't know what to do. My wife cheated on me. And his friends are like, get out, get divorced. I'm like, this guy's been in a 20-year relationship with kids, and you're giving advice in 5 seconds.
Yeah, there's nuance and layers and circumstances.
Exactly.
And it's
you don't know what the feelings are.
You don't know, right?
And that's why, like, I've learned to get to this stage in life where I just share my experience and what's worked and what's not worked for me. And I try really hard not to give advice. Like, I have a friend going through it today, and he's like, what do I do? I'm like, you got to find out what you want to do, but find out what you want to do from a healthy adult perspective, not a scared little boy or an angry teenager.
I always say my job is to raise the questions, not necessarily give the answers. There's huge value in raising the questions. So if somebody's going through it, ask some questions that they might have thought of. Right. Don't just be like, well, here's the answer. Here's what you should do. I don't feel qualified on any front to do that. I love that.
That's awesome.
That is awesome.
That's awesome. Charles, what do you got for good old Brian here and all his wisdom and all his years of this great experience?
Well, my first question is of paramount significance. Are you sure that's the best discount you can do on a second podcast?
I'll ask around.
No, this is good. So I came from information technology, right? That's where I spent my entire career after I left. I started my career working with Todd, and then I was in IT for a long time. And I know exactly what that IBM businessman looks like. I know how they talk. I know how they think. It is.
They literally have signs that say "fake" in the IBM corporate. Yeah,
people pleaser to the core.
Well, IBM invented corporate America as we know it today. Right. They absolutely invented it.
They had the training program for it.
It is the model that every company, every corporate American company follows, the IBM model, right? And that's that metric sales deal, right? So. Yeah. I can picture your father. Have never met him, but I've met him 10,000 times, right? So he gave his life to the company, and it's all ones and zeros. It's ones and zeros and spreadsheets and data, and it's a submarine with no windows, and they're turning the dials, right? So I get it when you said you're abstract, right? And in that life, how your mother lived and how you lived.
It was a black and white life.
It was black and white. It was ones and zeros, and you were abstract, and there was no abstract thinking. So so you took "you're funny" as criticism, not as a compliment.
Right, because they're like that. You're not a serious person. Yeah. One thing that they didn't take from IBM that the culture doesn't have. My mother was Miss IBM. Can you imagine that now? Of the secretarial pool, they had like a beauty pageant.
That's hilarious.
And I'm like, oh my God, that would not.
There was no skin showing on that calendar.
That was back in the 60s.
There's no skin showing
on that one. But I'm like, oh man, that was corporate. But you belonged to an IBM country club, and you did everything was like that. And I'm like, nobody's laughing in this room.
It wasn't a celebration at all.
This Christmas party, this seems terrible. And I would be like, I don't want this. My grandfather was like the one that I was very close to. I think he was a milkman back in the day. He was a happy guy. Yeah. Take me.
I always find, the landscapers, the guys working at the rehab center, like the guys with the hourly job by far are the happier than the ones with the big, big salaries and the big money coming in.
Well, there's so much pressure that comes with that. There's a lot of pressure.
Those guys, the hourly guy, the laborers, they get off the clock. Yeah. At some point, they leave that behind and they find life in the other 16 hours of the day, after their 8-hour shift is gone. And I'm like, that appealed to me. I like those people. I feel they're interesting. My dad and his colleagues
they're not real. In corporate America, they're not real.
No.
Like, I'm not going to walk in here and go, what you said really offended me, and I'm hurt, and I'm upset, and I'm pissed that you said that to me. No, what you get is, oh, thank you, I really appreciate that, and compliment blah 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 to you, and before you know it, there's like all this lying going on, which is I call people pleasing, but it's pure lying. And you go home pissed, and you tell your wife and your kids, like, fuck that guy. I can't believe that guy said that. And before you know it, you're like building this massive resentment. And all you had to do was be honest with the guy and talk to the guy, right?
Yeah. And then you get in a situation where you're not getting any positive approval. So up until not that long ago, maybe 5 years ago, if I was in a meeting, in a room, in a work environment with a female, I would want to know, does she like me? Would she like me? Could I get her? Like, always. It was always like a part of my brain.
A challenge, yeah.
It's just, I didn't even need to get her. I would just need her to like notarize some signed docs that'd be like, yes, he could if he wanted to. Like, I would just need to know that. Like, would this person like me?
Well,
and
it's
weird.
interesting. It's interesting you bring it up.
I get that.
It's literally being in a capitalist society and living in the U.S., and especially with like us playing competitive sports, Charles, it's like the challenge of seeing if we can get a woman is 90% of like the early dating stage. Like, I would always want to see, can I get this girl? And once I got the girl and I got her to move in, I'm like, okay, I'm done. Now I'm ready for the next one.
Right. I was one of those.
But then I couldn't get rid of her.
Right. Or find out she's interested and you're done even then. Oh, she likes you.
That's what I said. Like, okay, you would though, right? Yeah. Good. Check. On to the next. I wouldn't even need it. And I'm like, this is
just, can you win? Can you win that match?
Years and how many wasted her time and all that did I go through just because I needed some validation from strangers, colleagues, everybody. It was
instead of like, let's interview this person and go slow and get to know them. And maybe after 6 months or a year, we can say, okay, I really like you.
Yeah.
And not have it be such a competition.
I need to know right then. Yes. I need a referendum on where we were at. Me and you right then.
And that's insecurity at its finest.
Yes,
like
for
approval
sure.
seeking as well. Yeah, absolutely.
That's like Larry David taking a hostage right there.
And looking back, I was like, oh my God, it must have been just awful for anybody around me, like some level of, I'm sure they could tell, I
think one of the first nights I took my ex-wife out, I remember saying, I went to Harvard.
Yeah, of course.
And, I told her like I was related to Trump, the Trump family. Yeah. And it's like, she believed me. And it's like, I told so many lies that I couldn't keep them all straight. And I would check into restaurants under the name Goldwater in town because Goldwater had a big name.
Yeah.
The funny thing is Charles did that too.
I was Barry Goldwater's grandson every time I was pulled over.
And I was like his nephew. And
smart move.
Yes,
and
exactly.
the funny thing is, like, we didn't even know each other at the time we're doing
this.
It's
the wildest
But
thing.
we're like the two sickest people in Phoenix, and we're doing this.
Yes.
And it's like we're both using the same shtick.
Yeah, it's crazy. When I heard you share that for the first time 17 years ago, I'm like, this is unbelievable.
You guys been kicking around this sandbox a long time.
I just want to be. I just want to be more. I just want to be lifted up. I want to be put on a pedestal. But the reality is, I really don't want that. That's what I think I want. But nowadays, like, I don't want that. Like, I don't want to check in as a Goldwater. I don't want to check in with all this attention. Like, I just like being another bozo on the bus kind of guy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm super introverted. I don't want to talk to, like, I will take the stairs to avoid an elevator conversation or whatever. People are like, well, but you're in the entertainment business, you host stuff. I'm like, you're in control of the conversation when you do a podcast or when you're on a date or something. It's the stranger that the small talk, sit at this table at a wedding. It's like terrifying to me. I almost stopped doing my live Great Love Debate show because with 15 minutes left in the show, I'd be like, how do I get out of here without talking to anybody?
Yes.
I don't want any part of it. And people are like, that's so weird because you're telling everybody else that they should get out of their comfort zone and break down your walls or whatever. I'm like, nope, not me.
I am the same person you in that regard. People are like, oh, you're so charismatic. You're so good around people. I'm always the first person. I get very uncomfortable in large situations. I try to avoid the same thing. Next thing I want to...
Before you get into that, and make sure you don't forget your thought, because I do that all the time. But you just mentioned something that I was thinking about that's in this red book, and there's two ways to go when you're really having trouble in the relationship side. And it's called relationship anorexia, where you don't want to talk to anyone, you don't want to date anybody. You literally just want to live in your own little bubble, in your own little world. And then there's the flip side of that, where you need a lot of people around you to make you feel okay. You're texting 8 different girls, you know, you're on social media, you're like, oh my God, you know, connect, love, like, you know, talk to me, come over my house, let's do this. Like, and it's like, there's a flip side, right?
Which is why the pandemic was such an interesting social experiment. The people who wanted to be deep in their hole were allowed to go even deeper. Yeah. And the people who didn't want to live life like that, like they were cut off from the stimuli that they needed.
They were freaking out.
It really screwed with a lot of people on sort of both sides of it.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, totally. That was actually a great experiment, because the people that were sort of depressed and relationship anorexia were like, yes.
They're like, can we lock down forever? The world is not going to get ahead of me if we're all even.
We're never coming back out.
It was the great equalizer.
And the codependents who need a lot of people sucking up to them all the time were like, I'm fucked, you know? So it was really interesting. You know, they're like making friends with the delivery people at DoorDash and Uber Eats.
Yeah.
Like, hey, you want to hang out? You know, it's like, come on in.
You know, it broke
put a mask on.
It broke a lot of people. You know, I said it was like living life, the yellow flag when the cars can't pass each other in a car race. It was like that for people. Everybody was sort of frozen in place for 2 years. A lot of people want that to go on forever.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, we talk about things to make us uncomfortable a lot on this show. And our other co-host, Blake, is in a week or two is going on that 4-day darkness retreat that Aaron Rodgers does.
Thing. Yeah. Aaron Rodgers supposedly only lasted like a day and a half.
He's going up to do that. And I also have a couple good friends that do 30-day silent retreats. And where there's no communication, no eye contact, certainly no electronics. And it's funny to see how people deal with this, because when you take away all that stimuli and all that validation from people, like, who are they really? Right. And a lot of these people like start crying, like to the point where, oh my God, like I am really sad. And you don't realize how much you need from people, right?
Yeah. You need somebody to hit the ping pong ball back.
Yeah.
You know, you do. Just idle thought. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that's an interesting thing to even try that. I don't know.
So you mentioned that now you're interested in potentially being in a monogamous long-term relationship. Are you?
Yeah.
You are right now?
Yes.
Or you're in a relationship, or
yes.
you're interested?
Both.
Okay.
Yes. I'm not sure she's interested.
Ladies, delete his number. He's burning the black book.
Yes. I like it, and every day, I think I am.
How long have you been in this relationship?
A few years.
Okay.
And I think that, I know that it's struggle is probably the wrong word, but I constantly have to be aware of behavioral patterns or things. So, for years I was in the bars and the clubs, just like everybody else. I was, just, you guys know this. And then I don't drink anymore. Not because I had a problem, just because I'm in a relationship, I don't feel the need for that.
Okay.
I don't feel the need to get wasted and hopefully have some girl like me in the club. Like,
right.
It just sort of stopped. And people always say to me now, like, oh my God, it's hard to imagine you like that all the time. And I was always like, well, that's how you know if I'm dating somebody is how much am I drinking? And that's so bad that those were related. I could never talk to a girl sober.
Yeah, for sure. I know the feeling.
It's crazy.
And then I would overshoot the mark, and I would be like so drunk that I would just be staring at her like in abyss.
I know, we're just going to talk to each other over
dinner.
Yeah,
like I'm so drunk I can't talk, and I'm just going to stare at you like I'm literally an invalid. And I'm like, just like, oh my God, I'm catatonic.
You'd go up. I mean, the only way to approach somebody back in the day was, would you want to drink, or would you like to do a shot? Like that was the only lines I had.
My first date was always Kyoto's, by the way, in my 20s. That was my first date always. But give me your top 2 or 3 behavioral patterns that come up for you that you need to look at in your current relationship, and how does your girlfriend tell you, like, okay, this is coming up and I just want to let you become aware of it?
I grew up in a yelling household, and I think that I tend to raise my voice to be heard in circumstances that don't merit it.
And what do you think's behind that?
I associate noise with being heard. I associate my mother and father yelling,
listen to me.
You're not hearing me.
Right.
And so I would raise my voice for no reason.
Fear, intimidation, listen to me, control.
Like if I'm louder,
right.
It was terrible. I hate to tell the story, but I was in a meeting with Harvey Weinstein back in the day, and there was like 20 people around a big conference table, and he like picked up a Diet Coke can and like fired it at somebody's head. And I was like, and the whole room, like, it got their attention. I'm like, that was awesome.
Yeah.
I was like, that's how you do it. And I was like, so like mesmerized by the reaction that had, that I was like, oh, if I just act like a big alpha bully in work situations, and I was a director and a producer and all that, I was like, oh, I saw it worked for Harvey. It was so bad. I carried that around for a long time. I'm like, oh, you could just fake anger, and that would be to get the result, because I saw the result that he got.
Isn't it funny how he like
terrible?
What modeling will do. My first business partner, my mentor, I call him, my dad's partner. He was a rageaholic and similar. So he'd break golf clubs on the golf course. He would scream at people. He would he would kick people out of the meeting, belittle them in front of like 20 people. Same type of thing. And so I was like, okay, that's how you do it. You want to become successful. That's what you do. Not knowing there was another way. So I started to do that. And it was just really amazing how big of a dick I became and what an asshole I became, and it wasn't until I started doing therapy and got sober that I realized, holy shit, I really don't like this guy.
Somebody told me once, described me as a charming asshole, and that was the greatest compliment in the world to me. I'm like, oh, it's like impish asshole. I like that. But about a year ago, I did a podcast that in a relationship, and in my relationship now, there are only 5 things I really need to hear. And the importance of these 5 things has shifted over the years. I need to hear good morning. I need to hear good night. I need to hear thank you. I need to hear I'm sorry. And I need to hear I love you. And early on, I love you had a great significance of importance, and thank you I needed the thing that I need now in my relationship, the thing that means the most to me is I'm sorry. Because I think that is the hardest. It's the most personal. It's the one I trust the most. I don't know why I need apologies from somebody that I love, even though I know. It has a huge significance to me to hear it, because I think I need to hear it from a lot of people.
Do you have a hard time saying it?
No, not anymore. I'm a little too fast and loose with it.
So yeah, okay, I get that.
But it really, like, I wanted thank you, like appreciation for a long, long time. I wanted I love you for a long, long time. First thing in the morning, good morning. Last thing, good night. I needed all that. But the significance in the last, 5 years, as I've gone deeper into the journey and therapy, whatever, that I really need I'm sorry out of my partner, which is, that's on them, what they feel or not, is both good and bad. It's good that I appreciate it, but it's bad that somebody knows that and they're like, I have to apologize all the time.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it's not good.
So when you raise your voice and you start, yelling, what is your girlfriend, how does she respond?
Goes into a shell, a hole. Like if you're not
so
used to that. Yeah.
Does she leave? Does she yell back, or
she
gets scared?
She gets quiet. She's like, I'm not. It would be better for me if somebody yelled back, because then, or like, to me, I could be like, okay, we're going to play in this thing. When you yell at somebody and there's no reaction,
you feel bad about yourself.
Yeah. And so I'm much better than I used to be, but there's occasion where I'm just so, and you would make excuses. I'm like, no, I'm just passionate. I'm just talking. Right. I'm just talking enthusiastically.
I'm tired. I'm hungry.
Yeah, just whatever. But I would be like, I don't understand, and I want to know why. And it's so bad. But I'm aware of it, and it's not nearly what it was, but it was always like the sound of, yelling, because that's what I grew up in. I grew up in New York in a yelling house.
So it sounds like, and I always say this is not 100%, but this is probably 93%. I always say one person becomes becomes one parent, and then the partner becomes the other parent, because they're trying to model what they were familiar with. So if just go with me on this. So if that was your case, would you think you'd be your dad in the relationship?
No. Well, my mom was the yeller.
Okay. So you'd be more like your mom in that sense?
I don't know. I mean, they're not models. I don't know. I'm trying not to be.
I definitely went with my dad in most of my relationships.
No doubt.
My dad was too cold. I would never want to think of that. Like, I don't think I ever really made physical contact with my father. Like, my whole life. Like, maybe a handshake when I graduated college, barely. But I don't remember, none of that. I never heard an I love you in my house, ever. The Howies were not an I love you.
Do you say
bunch.
I love you to your girlfriend?
All the time?
All the time.
Yeah, I try. You know, you can go both ways. Just like with addiction, you can either lean into it or go away from it. Here's what I need, so I say it, hoping to get it back. But you know, sometimes they don't need what I call the Gesundheit I love you.
Right.
Like, I don't need the I love you too necessarily. I want it like
Right. Well,
freestanding.
then it's not meaningful. You don't trust it as much.
Right. So I need it, but you can't. Somebody can't give it to you because you need it. It has to come from them, and then you're putting
Has to
some
be
pressure.
authentic.
So you're always trying to match your journeys and stuff. But the more I've been aware of why I need certain things, it takes a lot of the pressure off communicating that. You know.
I always say for a relationship to go long term and to be real and intimate and lasting, it has to have really, really healthy conflict. How do you guys have healthy conflict in your relationship?
I think that healthy conflict comes from having conversations where neither of us is entirely sure of the answer, and we admit that, and we work things out in real time. And sometimes that gets spirited and not. If you both feel the same way, or you both feel like you have an answer to something, then you're trying to sell each other on you're right. If it's like, I think we should do this, and they're like, I think, and like, let's make a big mess and see where that comes. That can involve all of the things, the passion and the curiosity and the conflict and everything, and get somewhere good. I actually think that's productive, even though it can be spirited.
But what if I say this book is red and my wife says, no, this book is blue, Todd. And I said, no, it's red. And she goes, Todd, it's blue.
Well, I've
how do
learned
we
over the last
resolve
couple
that?
of years, a woman doesn't need to be right. She does need to be heard. And if you're just going to be like, okay, that is the thing that that has hugely benefited me to learn that. I'm like, okay, maybe it's blue.
Yeah. So you're willing to fall on the sword
For sure.
Yeah.
Because for years, though, I wanted the right. I wanted to have the last word and whatever. I've learned how to step away, de-escalate, fold, whatever you want to, metaphor you want to use.
And being that stern, self-righteous, person, like, no, it is red. I'm telling you, it's red.
Right.
Like, I'm right, you're wrong.
And not only that, there's a good point on that. Not only did I need you to know that I was right, I needed you to know that you were wrong.
Yeah,
right.
That's the
And
behind
how
that
much
is-
energy are you spending on
Right.
that?
And now we all know behind that is a very scared little boy or girl. Very scared.
Right. The fact
and then they'll go talk about it after. Do you know what Todd said? Todd said this to me. And he is so wrong.
Yeah.
And it's like, how scared is that person?
Yeah.
How scared is that person?
The need for this and that. So it's just
Instead of being like, you know what?
your girlfriend or your wife or your boyfriend or it's not their job to be your therapist.
Right. And then so there's two pieces. One is you're always like flipping about something and causing you're never agreeing. You're always like, if they say red, I say blue. They say green, I say yellow. You're like always looking for the conflict. And then there's the other part, the flip side is I'll agree with whatever they say because I'm the dominant person in the relationship. They're the superior or the inferior person in the relationship. So if I want to go to Italy, we're going to Italy. I want to go to Chinese food, we're going to Chinese food. I want to go to this movie, we're going to this movie.
It can't always be conflict and it can't always be compromise. Like, you got to pick your spots. But
what if you have a partner that's just really insecure and be like, oh, whatever you want to do, Brian, whatever you want to do.
We've come up with a grading system, a thing that I like. I'm like 1 to 10. How strong do you feel about this? And we match the numbers. I'm like a 6. I'm like an 8. The 8 wins. I'm like, I'm not a 10 sure on this, and she'll be like, oh, I'm a 9 sure. I'm fine with that.
End of story.
Yeah, I even do that. I even do that here with employees and stuff. And I'm like, a lot of times I'm just a 10 and I'm absolutely sure, but sometimes I'm like a 6. Does anybody have a card that will beat that? And if they're like an 8, they're like, I have an 8. I'm like, okay, we'll go with the 8.
And then it's over.
Yeah, I wasn't to be like a 6 beats a 4. I'm like, who has the highest degree of surety on this matter? And I'm like, okay, I'll go to that. It's nice not to always be the one who either had the answers or who feels the strongest about it.
Well, you're not going to be challenged. Right? I've dated women who would do whatever I said. They put me on a throne. And whatever I said, I was the golden rule. And that works if you're someone's boss or something, but not in a relationship, right? So it's like, okay, I will lose respect for you pretty darn quickly if you don't have a voice and an opinion.
Yeah.
On the other side of that, if you're constantly arguing with me, I don't want to be around that because that kind of gets old after a while, right? There's a nice, healthy balance in the middle where you're like, you have self-esteem, you have an opinion, and you know how to resolve it in a healthy way, like you said, by the grading system.
Yeah, I dated this girl for a long time, and she was an Ivy League lawyer, and she never had said one sentence that didn't involve that in some way. And it was just an insecure, I need everybody to know that I'm pretty, but I'm also really smart. And to me, I'm like, okay, I'm with you. I know you're smart and I know you're pretty. You don't have to convince me all the time that you are. But she was so used to having to do that even the most casual conversations, she had to, sort of impugn on me that I'm smart and you have to listen to me. And it was exhausting all the time. Yes. She wouldn't just, I'm like, I know it, but she'd spent, 15 years trying to convince the world that, yeah, I have platinum blonde hair, but I went to Cornell. I'm like, I know that, and it just was a hard habit to break. She could not let that go.
I know I have a lot of friends that went to Ivy League schools, and the insecure ones. Well, I kind of joke with my friends. I'm like, how long does it take before this person throws in where they went to school? And we'll joke, and we'll be like, 2 minutes. They'll be like, nah, 5 minutes. And we'll literally time it. And they're like, yeah, 2 minutes,
But I'm not sure I would ever take off the Harvard sweatshirt if I went to Harvard. I probably would be one of those people.
Well, I got the Harvard sweatshirt, but I just didn't go there.
I would wear the Harvard sweatshirt all the time.
I went to Harvard Community College in Utah. That's where I went to school, and I failed out of there. But, this is a funny story. This is a true story. I was on my honeymoon with my ex-wife in London, and we're at the Natural Museum of History. And I was in line. I'm like, when I was at Harvard, when I was at Yale, I, used to study art history. And my wife's laughing because I use this gig all the time. And the guy in front of me turns around and goes, I teach at Yale. When did you go to Yale?
Oh, no.
And I literally didn't know where Yale was. And I'm like, holy shit, totally busted. And it's
And you're wearing a Goldwater.
I wasn't a Goldwater. I wasn't a Trump. Who else did I use? I think I used the Icon, Kennedy,
Rockefeller. I used Rockefeller.
I always.
There's a couple of American Greed episodes where they used Rockefeller. I can relate to those.
I'm curious about Trump. I know Trump a little bit. He owes me $17,000 from a show I did at his casinos years ago. But I spent a fair amount of time with Trump. He is exceedingly charming, and he wants you to believe that you think his technique is. He's going to convince you how great you are, that you won't need anything else from him. I don't have to pay you anything or whatever. I told you were great. That's enough. I gave you my seal of approval. You're fantastic. You're awesome. Whatever. I'm like, well, no, but we actually have to.
No, that was the payment.
Check here.
No, that was.
Yeah, and he's like, that's enough. The Trump seal of approval. I had a conversation with you.
So
and I
honored.
told you you were great, and that's it.
You don't need my money.
And it's weird because even the press corps who covers him every single day and didn't necessarily agree with his politics or everything, they're like, he's so good at that level of manipulation. So
but,
Bill Clinton,
isn't that business?
That is business. Bill Clinton was like that too.
I need to get you to buy or, take whatever I'm selling. Right? Whether it's software or hard goods, services, you have to buy what I'm selling. Mm-hmm. And how do I do that? I make you feel good about yourself.
Right.
That's right.
You're great.
Even if it's
I'm
a
great.
complete
We
lie.
should be together. I'm great. You're great. What we're doing is great. It's all great. If you're not a part of this, you're not great. Right. And it is a constant stream of that eventually you succumb to.
Yep.
But you're not a Trump, and neither am I.
Yeah. So, that's pretty funny because we did this, I don't know how many, 25 years ago.
Pre-internet.
Long ago.
That shtick wouldn't work anymore these days.
Because you can look it up.
Yeah.
But
all the companies I founded, they'd say, you didn't found that. Right.
Yeah. It's just amazing. But what questions do you have for us, Brian? You've been hearing our podcast for a little bit now. And
does everybody need to, I'm very big on what was your fork in the road? What was your rock bottom? What was your ever, is it easier to make a change when you have that, or are you better off not going to that scary place and pulling the parachute before you get there?
Charles, I'll let you answer, but I think for me, the higher your bottom is, the better it is, because you don't get a chance a lot of times when your bottom's really deep. So you don't make it.
Try and stay out of the abyss if possible.
Stay out of the abyss. When AA was started, and even ACA in the early 70s was started, it was typically very low bottoms. These are people that were in asylums or on the street or psych wards. They were bad. And nowadays, it's not so much. It could be just from someone going through a divorce who's really, really depressed and sad.
So there's not a need to be totally scared straight from
No.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So like when I first read the laundry list, I was separated from my wife and really feeling a lot of emotion and a lot of pain. And I read the laundry list and I started crying right over here at Houston's. And I'm like, I need some relief. And I'm either going to get relief through drinking, drugging, or finding some girls. And I didn't want the quick fix. I wanted to get healthy in a good, healthy fashion, not in a instant gratification. You know, because my old pattern when I got hurt in a relationship was drink, drug, girl, boom. That's it.
So you're more likely to have success with change if you don't wake up like naked in Mexico somewhere.
I mean, look, that works too because the willingness is higher.
Yeah.
But I find the willingness has changed over the years with more podcasts, more therapy, more tools at our disposal, you know. Where in the old days, it's like I had to call information to get the number of AA 24 years ago. And I mean, I didn't know anybody in the program. I literally called information, go, can I have the number of Alcoholics Anonymous?
And I will say this, because I do travel around and I hear from, hundreds of thousands of women on the fact that all men are assholes and all that kind of stuff. And I stand by this. There are more men in America in 2023 doing the work, asking the questions, seeking the help than at any time in the history of this country. There are more of those guys. It has become more accepted. It has become more normal. It has become, and that I think that is a good thing societally for all of us. I mean, it is a journey. I think the women got to be patient. It's not going to change overnight. But I think I run into more of those guys. Statistically, it's true. Anecdotally, it's true that there are more guys willing to go there.
Well, because I think it's sexy. The new spiritual self-help is like sexy.
Yeah.
Where if you talked about this stuff, like when I got sober 24
California
years ago,
thing, like my parents said,
the girls looking at you like, hey, if you're not this macho, cool, funny, rich guy,
right,
get out of here. Now you're talking about God and self and healing yourself and being vulnerable. Like women are
the most confident man in the room is usually the most vulnerable, or at least the one who's willing to own his weakness openly.
Yep.
And that does resonate. I'm shocked to learn that, but it is true.
Yep.
Yeah. Right or no?
Soraya, what do you think?
No, absolutely. I've always stuck by the phrase, I say it to all of my friends, no red flags is the red flag. And I think that a man who can acknowledge where his faults are, where he has issues, and his plan to fix it, ultimately, is significantly sexier than a guy who just has all this confidence, doesn't think that there's anything wrong with him, just God's gift to women.
Well, I always say the women look for red flags, the men look for green lights, okay? If she's looking for the red flag, make it easier on her to find it and then deal with it. It just will help that,
That is such a good point.
Yeah, I'm looking for the yellow flag. Proceed with caution.
Exactly.
Looking for the checkered flag.
And the other sort of crux of the disconnect is I think that the women want the men to try harder and the men want the women to make it easier. And that's the standoff where
Do you ever watch Frasier?
I have, yeah.
Yeah, I've
Frasier's coming back.
Yeah, he's coming back. It's his life now in Chicago. But I've watched every episode probably like 20 times. But Frasier is the epitome of this hopeless romantic that is super insecure. So he lays it on so thick when he starts dating. Roses and, calling every day and just like, oh my God, you're so beautiful. You're so amazing. And it has nothing to do with the girl. Like nothing to do with the girl. It's everything to do with Frasier.
Yep.
And he always gets himself in a bound because the girl finally is like, okay, you got me. You can stop.
Right. And it's also tough to sustain that.
Like, you don't need to impress me anymore. Like, we're dating now. Let's have like normal conversations.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, you're just amazing. I just love your smell. And he's like, no, you don't get it. Stop. Like, we're dating now. We're not seeing other people. And like the girl starts making fun of him. I mean, it's like, he's just the epitome of this helpless romantic,
Yeah. But asking questions of others, asking questions of yourself. Like curiosity is even in the relationship, like continuing to learn your partner. A lot of times married couples just stop that. They go from husband, wife to mom and dad, which is just a different plateau altogether. And then they just get into this comfort zone where they don't ask each other. They don't shake up the comfort zone. They don't do any of those things. And then the relationship goes stagnant and then you go home with some waiter.
I say when you become parents and you stop being married, and lovers and friends. Like you have no shot of success in the terms of intimacy and having fun, because the kids will eventually move out. Right. And the kids are eventually going to have their own lives. And it's like, you got to learn to stay in love and have the ability to continue to grow. And like Julie and I had date night at least once a week, if not twice a week.
Yeah.
The whole time the kids were in the house.
It matters.
You know, and we had 3 rules. You can't talk about money, you can't talk about the kids, and you can't talk about responsibilities around the house and things we had to do. So there's some days that we were on dates, we're like, how about that weather? You know, it's like, you know, it's like what did we talk about? You know, politics. Are we talking about? But you find shit to talk about. Yeah. You know, you find stuff to talk about that's interesting.
Yeah, I know. You just your opinion matters on the most simplest thing, and I think people just forget, or they get too used to being silent and reading their own thing, sharing space without any sort of interaction.
Well, I love that my wife and I now listen to a lot of the same podcasts, and we'll listen to like a 2-hour podcast, and then we'll spend the next 4 days discussing it.
That's cool.
Like this morning we did that. You know, it's just it's great to have that commonality and that common interest. Where before, like I would date a woman, like I would talk about a topic like, you know, Vietnamese cooking, like I could give a shit about, but I would be so interested in it and find out enough about it to be dangerous and like act like I was interested. Like, oh, he's so sweet. He's like, you know, I'm like, no, I'm just trying to people please and get the green light.
Right. I know 5 things about this. I can write a 200-word essay on the thing you're interested in, but nothing beyond that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true.
Brian, what do you have for our listeners? Give us just like the last couple things, 2-3 things to help them become better in relationships and become better like with themselves.
Well, I always say that the almost all of life's answers lie outside of your comfort zone. And so I tell people, when you are looking to find somebody new, or you're dating, or you're looking for a partner, there are 3 words you have to get rid of and never say again. Those words are not my type. If you're over 30 and you're still single, you have no type. Your type's not working out for you. And what I may mean by that is you have to be willing to forget whatever this image you have in your head, because there are thousands of possibilities to connect and discover opportunities all around you every single day. And we tend to be like, oh, I like blondes, or I need a guy who's 6'2", or I need all this. Get rid of all of that. And when you open your eyes to different possibilities, there's magic in maybe. And so possibilities are rooted in maybe. And if you allow yourself to go there, you got a better shot of finding something.
Awesome.
The person's inside the skin suit, not the skin suit.
I know.
Yeah, that's great advice. That's great advice. And the other thing I would say is, like, if you're super triggered and anxious when you're in the early stages of dating, you're probably either not ready to date or you got the wrong gal.
That's probably true
yeah,
too.
Because they're not making you feel safe at some level.
Yeah,
you know?
And a lot of people are like, "Oh, I need somebody who's a complete person before I date them." No, you don't. You need somebody who's done about 80% of it, and then the 2 of you can take yourselves
and
another 20% together.
Yeah.
You can go on the journey together.
Totally.
I love that.
Brian, thank you for coming on. We really appreciate it. It was an honor. It's been so great to get to know you and doing this podcast here. I think we're on about our 30th episode.
Yeah, I'm proud of you guys.
We're
you
loving
guys
it.
Continue. You have a million ways to slice this apple, and it's fresh every time.
Yeah, we're starting to market and get in front of a lot more listeners. So we're excited on where we're going and what we're doing, and we're blessed to be here at the Laundry List. So hope you guys have a great week. Please be nice to my friend this week, and we will see you next week on the Laundry List.
Guaranteed happiness.